Welcome to Raven Reports, where we explore the darkest corners of human behavior. I'm your host, and today's story is one that will make you question everything you see on social media. Behind every perfect filter and carefully crafted caption lies a reality we're never meant to see. What happens when someone decides to break that illusion? When the boundaries between the digital persona and the desperate truth collapse? This is the story of Eliza Winters and her final Instagram post. A story about secrets, power, and the length some will go to maintain a perfect facade. On a cold November evening, as rain pattered against windows across the sleepy coastal town of Harborview, 26-year-old Eliza Winters posted what would become her final message on Instagram. The photo showed her standing at the edge of Widow's Cliff, the town's infamous lookout point that rose nearly 200 feet above the churning waters of the Atlantic. Her silhouette was dark against a stormy sky, her long hair whipping in the wind like a flag of surrender. The lighthouse in the distance cast an eerie beam that seemed to just miss her, as if even light couldn't reach where she stood. The caption read simply, "Sometimes the only way out is through." By tomorrow, everyone will understand. The post was unlike her usual meticulously composed photographs. This one had a raw, almost desperate quality. The horizon tilted slightly, the focus wasn't quite sharp. It looked like it had been taken in haste, perhaps by someone who couldn't afford to linger. Within hours, that cryptic message would spark a frantic search, unleash buried secrets, and change the lives of everyone who knew her. Eliza wasn't just any resident of Harborview. She was the daughter of Mayor Richard Winters, a man known for his iron grip on the town's politics and his picture-perfect family image. At least, that was the facade they maintained. Richard Winters had served as mayor for nearly 15 years, transforming the once struggling fishing town into a trendy tourist destination, with luxury waterfront condos and upscale boutiques that locals could barely afford to shop in. His campaign slogan, "Family Values, Community Vision," was plastered on billboards across town, always featuring smiling photos of himself, his elegant wife Catherine, and their beautiful daughter Eliza. A successful photographer with a growing online following, Eliza had built her reputation, capturing haunting landscapes and intimate portraits that seemed to peer into the souls of her subjects. Critics described her work as hauntingly beautiful and disturbingly intimate. Her Instagram account, Eliza Winterscapes, had amassed over 300,000 followers, all drawn to her unique perspective and the mysterious aura she cultivated. Her signature style featured stark contrasts and often incorporated elements of decay alongside beauty. A withered rose against perfect skin, a crumbling building framing a sunset. Her captions were typically poetic, philosophical, sometimes cryptic, but never as ominous as her final post. But those who knew her personally would later say there had always been a sadness behind her eyes, a weight she carried that her online persona never fully revealed. Her high school art teacher would tell reporters, "Eliza created beautiful things from a place of pain. I always sensed she was searching for something through her art. Some truth, some resolution. I never imagined it would lead to this." The first person to raise the alarm was Eliza's roommate and childhood friend, Mia Chen. The daughter of Harborview's only Chinese restaurant owners, Mia had befriended Eliza in elementary school when the Winters girl had defended her against bullies. Despite their different backgrounds, Mia's family working 16-hour days to make ends meet while the Winters lived in the largest house in town, their friendship had endured. They shared a love of art, though Mia had channeled hers into graphic design rather than photography. Mia had been scrolling through her feed around 8:15 p.m. when Eliza's post appeared. Unlike Eliza's usual carefully composed shots, this one felt raw, almost desperate. Mia immediately tried calling Eliza, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent a text, "Just saw your post, are you okay? Call me ASAP." No response came. After trying 3 more times over the next 20 minutes, Mia began to panic. She called their mutual friend, Jake Dawson, who hadn't heard from Eliza since their coffee meetup the previous day. "I knew something was wrong," Mia would later tell investigators, twisting the silver friendship bracelet Eliza had given her for her 25th birthday. Eliza was private about her feelings, but she'd been different in the weeks before she disappeared, more withdrawn. She'd spend hours locked in her darkroom, and when she emerged, her eyes were always red, like she'd been crying. When I asked what was wrong, she'd just say she was working on something important, something that would change everything. I thought she meant a new photography project, not this. "Eliza, it's Mia. I just saw your post." Please call me back. You're scaring me. Whatever's going on, we can figure it out together. Just please be okay. Mia tried 3 more times before grabbing her keys and racing to Widow's Cliff. The 20-minute drive along the winding coastal road seemed interminable, each curve revealing only more darkness. Her headlights cut through the heavy rain, occasionally illuminating the dangerous cliff edge warning signs that dotted the route. Mia's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Had Eliza jumped? Was she planning to? Or was the post symbolic of something else entirely? By the time she arrived, the rain had turned into a downpour. The cliff was deserted, the small parking area empty except for Eliza's vintage blue Volvo, a gift from her grandmother. Mia parked beside it and got out, the rain immediately soaking through her thin jacket. She tried the door of Eliza's car, locked. Peering through the window with the flashlight from her phone, she could see Eliza's purse still on the passenger seat, but no sign of her friend. "Eliza!" she screamed, her voice almost lost in the howling wind. "Eliza!" She ran to the cliff edge, careful not to get too close, scanning the turbulent waters below with her flashlight. Nothing but angry waves crashing against jagged rocks. The wooden observation platform was empty, the memorial benches dedicated to lost sailors unoccupied. Only a single red scarf, Eliza's favorite, caught on a branch near the path, fluttering like a desperate flag. Mia called the police at 9:42 p.m., reporting Eliza missing and expressing concerns about her mental state. Her voice shook as she described the Instagram post, the empty cliff, the abandoned car. The dispatcher promised to send someone right away, but the underlying skepticism in her tone was clear. Adults went missing by choice all the time, especially those from prominent families with pressure cooker lifestyles. Officer James Reynolds took the call. A 10-year veteran of the Harborview Police Department, Reynolds had seen his share of domestic dramas and rebellious rich kids. He would later admit he didn't take it as seriously as he should have. Instead of immediately dispatching a search team to the cliff or initiating missing persons protocols, he decided to drive by the Winters residence first, assuming Eliza had probably gone home after posting her dramatic message. "We get calls about adults going off-grid all the time," Reynolds explained, the regret evident in his voice during later interviews. Young people especially. They have a fight with their parents, post something cryptic on social media for attention, then turn up at a friend's house the next day. And with the mayor's daughter, I figured she was just blowing off steam, maybe had a fight with her father. The Winters family had a reputation for drama, but it always stayed behind closed doors. Richard made sure of that. That assumption would prove to be the first of many mistakes in the case of Eliza Winters. By the time Reynolds had checked with the mayor and realized Eliza wasn't there, by the time he'd driven to Widow's Cliff to meet a frantic Mia who'd been waiting in her car for over an hour, precious time had been lost. The storm had intensified, making any search of the cliff face or waters below impossible until morning. If Eliza had fallen or jumped, the chances of finding her alive were diminishing with every passing minute. By morning, Eliza's post had gone viral. What had started as a local concern was now national news. Mayor's daughter missing after cryptic post. The headlines blared. Thousands of comments flooded in, ranging from concerned followers asking if she was okay to amateur detectives speculating about what her cryptic message might mean. Some users claimed to have noticed warning signs in her previous posts. A darkening tone, more solitary images, fewer smiling selfies. Others analyzed the symbolism of Widow's Cliff, named for the women who had watched their husbands' fishing boats disappear during a catastrophic storm in 1897, never to return. The hashtag #WeFindElizaWinters began trending, and suddenly, the pressure was on the Harborview Police Department to take action. News vans lined the quiet streets of Harborview. Reporters stationed themselves outside the Winters mansion, the police station, and Eliza's Victorian home on Sycamore Street. Social media influencers made videos analyzing Eliza's Instagram feed, looking for clues. True crime podcasters speculated about foul play, suicide, or staged disappearance. Everyone had a theory, but no one had Eliza. Mayor Winters held a press conference on the steps of City Hall, his wife Catherine standing rigidly beside him. Both were dressed immaculately in understated navy blue, not quite funeral attire, but formal enough to convey the gravity of the situation. Their performance was flawless. Concerned parents desperate to find their beloved daughter. The mayor's voice cracked at just the right moments. and Catherine dabbed at invisible tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. But the practiced nature of their grief wasn't lost on those who knew them well. "Our Eliza is a sensitive soul," Richard Winters told the cameras, his silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the early hour. He adjusted his Harvard-class ring, a gesture those who knew him recognized as a tell that he was carefully constructing his words. "She's always felt things deeply. The weight of the world affects her more than most. We're concerned she may be having some emotional difficulties. She's been working so hard on her photography career, perhaps too hard. The pressure to constantly create can be overwhelming for artists." Catherine nodded solemnly beside him, her porcelain features betraying no genuine emotion. The pearl necklace at her throat, always pearls, never anything flashier, caught the morning light. "If anyone has seen her or has any information," the mayor continued, "please contact the police immediately. A full search of the coastline is underway, but we're praying, that Eliza has simply taken some time away to clear her head." His voice wavered artfully. "Eliza, sweetheart, if you're watching this, please come home. Whatever it is, we can work through it together. Your mother and I just want you safe." The performance was convincing. The nation saw a powerful man humbled by fear for his child, a family united in worry. But Mia Chen wasn't buying the concerned parent act. After enduring her own interrogation at the police station, where the questions seemed more focused on Eliza's mental state and potential substance use than on finding her, Mia approached Detective Olivia Marquez, the lead investigator assigned to the case. "You need to look into her family," Mia insisted, her voice low as she glanced around to make sure no one was listening. They stood in the back hallway of the station, away from the bustling main room where officers coordinated search efforts and fielded calls from concerned citizens and opportunistic psychics alike. "Things aren't what they seem with the Winters. That whole press conference was theater. Richard Winters cares about his image, not his daughter." Detective Marquez studied the young woman carefully. At 34, Olivia Marquez had seen enough grieving families to recognize genuine distress, and Mia's red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands spoke volumes. "What makes you say that?" "Eliza has been afraid of something, or someone, for months. She installed new locks on all our doors. She started checking the back seat of her car before getting in. She'd jump at sudden noises." Mia leaned closer. 2 weeks ago, I found her scanning our house for listening devices. When I asked her what was going on, she just said, 'The fewer people who know, the safer they are.' I thought she was being paranoid, maybe working too hard, but now," her voice broke, "now I think someone was after her, and I think she knew who it was." Detective Marquez had only been in Harborview for 2 years, having transferred from Boston following a difficult case and her subsequent divorce. The move had been an attempt to escape both professional burnout and personal heartbreak, a fresh start in a picturesque coastal town where serious crime was supposedly rare. She wasn't entrenched in local politics and had no loyalty to the mayor. When she looked into Mia's eyes, she saw genuine fear, not the attention-seeking behavior that often came with cases that garnered media attention. "Tell me everything," Marquez said, leading Mia to a quiet corner of the police station where the ancient coffee machine gurgled and sputtered, filling the air with the scent of burnt coffee. "Start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out, no matter how insignificant it might seem." Mia's story went back further than the detective expected, all the way to their senior year of high school 8 years earlier. Eliza and Mia had been inseparable since elementary school, despite the Winters family's wealth and status setting them apart from most of Harborview's residents. They had plans to attend the same college, to room together, to travel the world before settling into careers. Eliza dreamed of becoming a photojournalist, documenting humanitarian crises and environmental issues. Mia wanted to design album covers for musicians. "We had it all mapped out," Mia explained, her voice growing steadier as she lost herself in the memories. "Our friendship was the one constant in both our lives. My parents worked constantly, and Eliza's were—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Emotionally absent at best. We relied on each other." Then came the night of the winter formal. Mia had been waiting at her house, already dressed in the midnight blue gown Eliza had helped her choose. They planned to meet their dates at the dance. Mia with her then-boyfriend Tyler, Eliza with Jake Dawson, who'd had a crush on her since freshman year. But Eliza never showed up. Her phone went straight to voicemail. When Mia finally gave up and called the Winters household, Catherine informed her coldly that Eliza had had a nervous breakdown and was being sent to a private facility for treatment. Her voice was so, clinical, Mia recalled, shivering slightly despite the stuffiness of the room, like she was talking about sending a car for repairs, not her daughter to a psychiatric facility. She told me not to try to contact Eliza, that it would impede her recovery. Then she hung up. I didn't hear from her for 6 months, Mia explained, twisting a tissue between her fingers until it shredded. No calls, no texts, no emails. I tried everything. I went to their house every day for 2 weeks until Richard threatened to get a restraining order against me. I wrote letters that came back unopened. I even tried to find out which facility she was in, but the Winters never said, and none of the local hospitals had any record of her. Marquez made notes in her small leather-bound notebook, careful to capture every detail. And when she did return, she was different, quieter. She'd lost weight, too much weight. Her eyes seemed hollow, like something inside her had been extinguished. She never talked about where she'd been. Whenever I tried to ask, she'd change the subject or suddenly remember somewhere she needed to be. Mia swallowed hard. She deferred college for a year, and when she finally went, she chose a school across the country. We stayed in touch, but there was always this wall between us after that, this secret she wouldn't share. It was only when Eliza returned to Harborview 3 years ago, after her grandmother left her the old Victorian house on Sycamore Street, that their friendship began to rebuild. Mia had moved into the carriage house on the property 6 months ago after her own breakup. She's been working on this photography project, Mia continued, pulling out her phone to show Marquez some images Eliza had shared with her. Something about faces and masks, the personas people create. She called it Beneath the Surface. It featured pairs of portraits, one showing people as they presented themselves to the world, and another attempting to capture their true selves beneath the facade. She wouldn't tell me much about it, but I know it was important to her, and I know it had something to do with her parents. Detective Marquez leaned forward. Do you think her parents might have harmed her? Mia hesitated, her dark eyes troubled. Richard Winters has always been controlling. His public persona, the charming, progressive small-town mayor, that's not who he is behind closed doors. Eliza once told me that growing up in that house was like living in a pressure cooker. Everything had to be perfect. Any deviation from the script was met with, she paused, consequences. What kind of consequences? Marquez prompted, her pen poised above the notebook. She never specified. But I remember once in high school, Eliza showed up with bruises on her wrist. When I asked about them, she said she'd fallen during a hike, but the way she pulled her sleeve down, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, I didn't believe her. And Catherine? She's just as bad in her own way. Cold, calculating. She once told Eliza at a school event that her outfit made her look common, right in front of everyone. The humiliation on Eliza's face. Mia shook her head at the memory. But about 3 weeks ago, she came home late, completely shaken. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She was pale, like she'd seen a ghost. She paced the living room for hours, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle, and Eliza rarely drank. She wouldn't tell me what happened, but she said, some secrets aren't meant to stay buried forever. Sometimes they claw their way out. The next day, I caught her installing new locks on all the doors and windows. When I asked if she was afraid of someone, she just said, everyone has monsters. Mine happened to live in a mansion on Harbor Hill. Marquez wrote this down verbatim, underlining it twice. Did she mention any specific threats? Any particular incident that might have triggered this fear? Nothing specific, but she started spending more time in her darkroom, developing photographs I never got to see. She'd burn negatives in the backyard at night. One evening, I found her scanning old newspapers in the town library archives. When I asked what she was researching, she closed the screen and said it was for a historical photography project. But I saw the headline before she switched it off, something about a missing woman from years ago. As Detective Marquez began digging into Eliza's life, the image of the perfect mayor's daughter began to crack. She started with standard investigative procedures, examining Eliza's phone records, credit card statements, social media activity. Nothing immediately stood out. No unusual purchases, no suspicious contacts, no alarming searches. But it was the absences, the gaps in information that began to tell their own story. The private facility where Eliza had supposedly received treatment for a mental health crisis during her senior year of high school, it didn't exist. Marquez checked every psychiatric hospital, wellness retreat, and treatment center within a 500-mile radius. None had any record of an Eliza Winters as a patient. The 6 months of her senior year remained unaccounted for. Interviews with Eliza's former teachers painted a picture of a bright, creative student who showed no signs of mental illness or instability before her sudden disappearance. Her guidance counselor, now retired, remembered being troubled by the situation. One day she was fine, excited about college, working on scholarship applications. The next day she was gone, and we were told not to ask questions. The principal made it very clear that any inquiries about Eliza Winters would not be tolerated. At the time, I assumed it was about respecting the family's privacy. Now, I wonder if something else was going on. Her photography professor from college, Dr. Leon Wright, described Eliza as brilliantly troubled, with a portfolio that often explored themes of confinement and false appearances. Her work evolved significantly during her time here, he explained over a video call. Gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, his studio visible in the background. Her early pieces were technically proficient but safe. After her sophomore year, something changed. Her images became more raw, more confrontational. Her thesis project, Captivity, featured portraits of women in beautiful settings who, upon closer inspection, were actually trapped or constrained in subtle ways. Her best work always seemed to come from a place of pain, he said. Not the manufactured angst of most young artists, but something authentic and deep, something she was working through with her camera. Meanwhile, the search for Eliza continued. Coast Guard vessels patrolled the waters beneath Widow's Cliff. Volunteer teams combed the dense woods surrounding the area. Drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras scanned the rugged terrain. Her car yielded no clues beyond a memory card hidden in the spare tire compartment. When examined, it contained encrypted files that the department's tech expert was still working to access. On day 2 of the investigation, Marquez obtained a warrant to search Eliza's house. The Victorian on Sycamore Street was a photographer's dream. Tall windows that let in gorgeous natural light, original hardwood floors, and intricate crown molding that had been meticulously restored. The main living areas were minimalist and tidy, with gallery-quality prints of Eliza's work adorning the walls. But her darkroom, converted from a second-floor bathroom, told a different story. Contact sheets covered every surface, chemicals arranged with obsessive precision. The images visible on the drying lines showed familiar harbor view locations: the mayor's office, the Winters mansion, the town cemetery, all shot from concealed angles, as if the photographer had been hiding. Most interesting to Marquez were the notes scribbled on the margins of the contact sheets: dates, times, and cryptic abbreviations that seemed to be tracking someone's movements. RW, Town Hall to HC, 3:15 p.m., and CM delivery, Greenhouse, midnight. In a drawer beneath the enlarger, Marquez found a small notebook filled with similar notations, along with what appeared to be coordinates. The last entry, dated 3 days before Eliza's disappearance, read simply, "Found it. God help us all." When Marquez shared these findings with Mia, the young woman's face paled. HC must be Harbor Club, the private restaurant where Richard holds his unofficial meetings. And CM, that could be Cassandra Moore. She's the head of the Historical Society, but she's also been Richard's special friend for years. Everyone knows, except apparently Catherine, who conveniently looks the other way. And the greenhouse? Marquez asked. The Winters have this massive greenhouse on their property. Catherine is obsessed with rare orchids. It's like her private sanctuary. No one else is allowed in there, not even the gardeners. 3 days after her disappearance, Eliza's Instagram account became active again. The notification lit up phones across the country, followers, journalists, and investigators all receiving the alert simultaneously. A new post appeared, a black and white photo of a key with an antique design, ornate and clearly very old. The background was blurred but appeared to show weathered wood. The caption read, "The truth is locked away, but not for much longer." Within minutes, Jacker Eliza Winters' key was trending. Internet sleuths analyzed every pixel of the image, trying to determine what kind of key it was and what it might open. Some claimed it was photoshopped, evidence that someone had hacked her account. Others insisted it was a cry for help, a clue to her whereabouts. Comments ranged from the genuinely concerned to the wildly speculative. "Eliza, if you're reading this, please let someone know you're safe. That's a skeleton key, probably for an old building somewhere in Harborview. Has anyone checked lighthouses? That looks like a lighthouse keeper's key. The mayor is behind this. Wake up, people." The post sent shockwaves through Harborview. Was Eliza alive? Was someone else controlling her account? The comments section exploded with theories, and Detective Marquez found herself fielding calls from national media outlets, now interested in the disappearance of a prominent photographer with a mysterious social media presence. Marquez immediately requested Instagram track the IP address used to make the post. The preliminary report showed it had come from somewhere near Harborview, but the exact location was masked by a VPN. The timing and geolocation data didn't rule out Eliza herself making the post, but it also didn't confirm it. At Eliza's house, Marquez organized a team to search for anything matching the key in the photograph. They combed through drawers, jewelry boxes, hidden compartments, and antique furniture. Nothing. Mia couldn't recall ever seeing such a key in Eliza's possession. Mayor Winters appeared on television again, this time with a harder edge to his concern. Standing at a podium flanked by American flags, his posture was rigid, his jaw set in determination rather than grief. The compassionate father was being replaced by the commanding public official, a subtle shift that wasn't lost on Marquez as she watched the press conference from her desk. "We have reason to believe our daughter's accounts have been compromised," he stated firmly, eyes narrowed at the assembled reporters. "We're working with authorities to track down whoever is playing this cruel game. To the person or persons responsible, you will be found and you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Harborview takes care of its own." The implied threat in his final statement hung in the air. Catherine stood beside him, her face an expressionless mask, hands clasped tightly in front of her designer suit. Not once did she speak or show any visible emotion. But behind the scenes, the mayor was putting pressure on the police chief to wrap up the investigation quickly. Chief Wilson had called Marquez into his office immediately after the press conference, closing the door with unusual force. "The mayor is breathing down my neck about this," Wilson said, loosening his tie as he slumped into his chair. A former football player gone to seed, Wilson had been appointed by Winters himself 8 years earlier. Their weekly golf games were common knowledge around the department. "He wants results, Marquez, and frankly, so do I. This media circus is making the department look incompetent. We're following every lead, Chief," Marquez replied, keeping her tone neutral despite her rising frustration. "But there are inconsistencies in this case that need to be addressed. The Winters family—" Wilson cut her off with a dismissive wave. "I know you're new here, Marquez, but let me give you some advice. The Winters aren't just any family. Richard has connections all the way to the governor's office. He's helped build this town into what it is today. All the more reason to be thorough," Marquez countered. "If the mayor has nothing to hide—" "I'm not saying don't investigate," Wilson interrupted, his face reddening. "I'm saying be smart about it. The mayor shared some concerns with me about Eliza's mental state. Apparently she's had episodes before. Paranoia, delusions. They've kept it quiet to protect her privacy." Marquez thought of the missing 6 months, the non-existent treatment facility. "With all due respect, sir, we need to consider all possibilities." Wilson leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper that felt more threatening than if he'd shouted. "Find my daughter," he said, unconsciously echoing what the mayor had demanded during their own closed-door meeting that Marquez wasn't supposed to know about. "Or find a body. I don't care which, but this needs to end before it damages my re-election campaign." Marquez left the office with a clearer understanding of the political landmine she was navigating. As she walked back to her desk, Officer Reynolds intercepted her, a strange expression on his face. "You need to see this," he said, handing her a printout of an old newspaper article. It was in an envelope addressed to you, left at the front desk. No return address. The yellowed photocopy showed a Harborview Gazette article from 27 years ago. The headline read, "Local reporter still missing after 3 weeks." The accompanying photo showed a young woman with intelligent eyes and a determined smile, Rebecca Holloway, age 24, last seen leaving the Gazette office after filing a story on alleged improprieties in zoning commission appointments. Scrawled across the bottom in red ink were the words, "History repeats itself. Check the lighthouse." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 17-year-old Tyler Jenkins, a high school student who worked part-time at the Harborview Historical Society, recognized the key from the Instagram post. He'd been following the case closely, partly out of genuine concern, and partly, as he admitted sheepishly to Detective Marquez, because he'd had a crush on Eliza since he was a kid, and she'd judged the annual school photography contest. "That's from the old lighthouse keeper's residence," he told Detective Marquez, showing her an identical key in the society's collection. His hair fell into his eyes as he leaned forward eagerly, a lanky teenager in an oversized Harborview high sweatshirt. They all had these custom keys made back in the 1890s. The lighthouse keeper, his assistant, and the harbor master each had one. They were handcrafted by a local blacksmith. See the shell design on the bow? That was his signature. He pulled out a leather-bound logbook from beneath the counter, flipping to a page marked with a faded ribbon. According to this, there were only 12 ever made, 3 keys for each of the 4 lighthouses that once operated along this stretch of coastline. Most of them have been lost over time. We only have this one in our collection. Marquez examined the key carefully, comparing it to the image on her phone. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same ornate head, the same distinctive notches in the bit. And where would this open now? Only one of the lighthouses is still standing, North Point, about 3 miles up the coast. The keeper's residence there has been abandoned for decades. The lighthouse itself was automated in the 1970s, but the house just kind of fell into disrepair. It's on protected land owned by the state, so it was never demolished. Kids dare each other to go there on Halloween. It's supposed to be haunted. Tyler hesitated, then added, Eliza came in here about a month ago, asking about the lighthouse. She said she was working on a photography project about forgotten places and wanted to know the history. She spent hours going through our archives, especially the materials about North Point and the families who lived there. Marquez's pulse quickened. Did she seem interested in anything specific? She asked a lot of questions about access to the property, whether anyone lived nearby, if there were any regular patrols. I thought it was just about avoiding trespassing charges while she got her shots. He frowned, connecting the dots. You don't think she's been there this whole time, do you? I'm going to find out, Marquez replied, already reaching for her phone to call for backup. Thank you, Tyler. You may have just helped us find her. Eliza, Marquez called out, her voice echoing through empty rooms. Eliza Winters? This is Detective Marquez. We're here to help. The building appeared empty at first glance, but signs of recent occupation were evident. Fresh footprints in the dust, a camping lantern still warm to the touch, a sleeping bag neatly rolled in the corner of what had once been a parlor. Empty energy bar wrappers and water bottles were carefully collected in a plastic bag. Whoever had been staying here was methodical, careful not to leave much trace. Eliza Winters stood in the center of the room, a ghost of her former self. Her usual polished appearance had been replaced by unwashed hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes, and clothes that looked slept in. But despite her disheveled state, her gaze was clear and focused, her posture straight, not the demeanor of someone having a breakdown. I'm not crazy, she said immediately, as if reading Marquez's assessment. I know what this looks like, what they're saying about me on the news, but I'm not having some kind of episode. I'm hiding because I have to. Why don't we sit down? Marquez suggested gently, and you can tell me what's going on. Eliza hesitated, then nodded toward a hallway. Not here, in the back office. I need to show you something. She led Marquez through the dusty house, each room emptier and more decayed than the last, until they reached what must have once been the lighthouse keeper's office. Unlike the rest of the house, this room showed signs of intensive use. A battery-powered camping lantern cast harsh shadows across walls that were no longer bare. What Marquez saw made her stop in her tracks. Photos, documents, and newspaper clippings connected by red string covered an entire wall. At the center was a photograph of the Winters family, taken when Eliza was around 16, with the words, "Everything is a lie," scrawled across it in red marker. Around it, in meticulous organization, was what could only be described as an investigation board, the kind Marquez herself might create for a complex case. I've been working on this for 3 years, Eliza said quietly, watching Marquez's reaction. Ever since I found my grandmother's diaries after she died. She knew things about my father, about what happened before I was born. I thought she was just bitter because my dad had pushed her out of the family business. But then I started digging and she gestured to the wall. Everything led back to this. But what caught Marquez's attention were the yellowed newspaper clippings dating back to 27 years ago, before Eliza was even born. They detailed the disappearance of a young woman named Rebecca Holloway, a reporter for the Harborview Gazette who had been investigating corruption in local government. According to the articles, Rebecca had been working on a major expose about irregularities in the town's zoning decisions and sudden changes in waterfront property values. She had vanished without a trace, her case eventually going cold when the police, then led by Chief Thomas Gillespie, a close friend of Richard Winters' father, concluded she had likely left town voluntarily after receiving threats related to her reporting. In the margin of one article, Eliza had written, "Found her. She didn't just disappear." Beside the investigation board was a laptop, still powered on, but locked with a password. Next to it sat an expensive camera with a telephoto lens and stacks of photographs showing the Winters mansion, particularly the greenhouse area, taken from a distance. Rebecca Holloway, Marquez said, the name clicking into place from the anonymous tip she'd received. She went missing 27 years ago. She didn't just go missing, Eliza said, her voice hardening. She was murdered by my father. Marquez kept her expression neutral, though her heart rate increased. That's a serious accusation. What evidence do you have? I have their correspondence, Eliza replied, moving to the laptop and entering a complex password. Emails my father thought were deleted long ago, but were backed up on servers I was able to access. Messages between them showing they were having an affair while he was already engaged to my mother. Financial records showing he was paying Rebecca a monthly stipend that suddenly stopped around the time she disappeared. She pulled up documents on the screen, showing Marquez emails with increasingly desperate tones from Rebecca to Richard, speaking of our situation and responsibilities. And finally, in the last message, I won't be silenced about the baby or the zoning fraud. You have 24 hours to do the right thing. She was pregnant, Eliza said quietly, with my father's child. The timing lines up perfectly with his engagement to my mother, a strategic marriage to the daughter of the wealthiest developer in the county, a pregnant reporter threatening to expose both the affair and his involvement in his future father-in-law's corrupt land deals. He couldn't allow that. This is all circumstantial, Marquez said carefully, though she was troubled by what she was seeing. What makes you believe she was murdered, rather than simply disappearing? Eliza's expression darkened. 3 weeks ago, I finally got access to Marcus Reeves's financial records. He's been my father's security consultant for 30 years. His fixer, really. There was a large cash payment to him the day after Rebecca disappeared. And then this. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Marquez. It was a property map of the Winters estate, with an X marked near the greenhouse. This was in my grandmother's diary, hidden between pages. She wrote that she'd seen Marcus digging there late at night around the time Rebecca vanished. She suspected, but could never prove anything. The greenhouse wasn't built until a month later. Marquez studied the map, her detective's mind racing. If what you're suggesting is true, why come forward now after all these years? Because history is repeating itself, Eliza said, her voice breaking slightly. And I couldn't live with the knowledge that I might be next. Before Marquez could ask what she meant, her phone rang. It was the station. Another Instagram post had just appeared on Eliza's account, a video this time. The timestamp showed it had been uploaded only minutes ago. That's impossible, Eliza said, looking genuinely confused. I scheduled that post for tomorrow. It shouldn't have gone live yet. You scheduled it? As insurance, in case something happened to me. Eliza looked frightened now. Someone must have triggered the backup protocol I set up, which means they know I'm here. Back at the station, Marquez watched the video with Mia and the investigation team gathered around her computer screen. The footage was high quality, Eliza's professional standards evident even in this desperate communication. It showed Eliza, looking pale but determined, sitting in what appeared to be the lighthouse keeper's residence, the investigation board visible behind her. If you're watching this, then the scheduled upload worked, and I'm ready for what comes next, she began, her voice steady, despite the fear evident in her eyes. For years, I've been searching for the truth about Rebecca Holloway and what my father did to her. 3 weeks ago, I finally found it. The video cut to footage of what appeared to be a hidden camera recording. It showed Mayor Winters in his home office, a richly appointed room with leather-bound books and sailing memorabilia, arguing with someone off-screen. He looked older than his public appearances, the carefully maintained image slipping to reveal a man whose power had begun to corrupt him from within. You think I don't know what you've been looking into? The mayor's voice boomed, slamming his fist on the mahogany desk. Rebecca Holloway is ancient history, and that's where it's going to stay. You have no idea what's at stake here. The camera angle shifted, revealing Eliza stepping into frame. Her posture was defensive, but her voice was surprisingly steady. She was pregnant with your child when she disappeared, Eliza said, her voice shaking. You killed her because she wouldn't get an abortion, because she was going to expose your relationship and ruin your precious political future. The mayor's face contorted with rage, then settled into something even more frightening, cold calculation. You don't have proof of anything, he said softly, and you never will. Remember what happened the last time you tried to defy me? 6 months is nothing compared to what I could do to you now. Is that a threat? Eliza's voice rose slightly. It's a promise, Richard replied, his politician's smile returning like a mask slipping back into place. You're my daughter, Eliza. I love you. But you're also unwell. Everyone knows about your emotional problems, your breakdowns. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected mayor who's revitalized this town? Or his unstable daughter with a history of mental illness? The video cut back to Eliza, addressing the camera directly. I do have proof. Everything is documented on the drive hidden with this video. The evidence about Rebecca, about where her body is buried on our family property, and about what really happened during those 6 months I was getting treatment. She took a deep breath. I wasn't having a mental breakdown. I was pregnant. My father locked me away until I gave birth, then forced me to give up my baby for adoption through an illegal service that falsified all the records. I've spent the last 3 years trying to find my child. Mia gasped beside Detective Marquez, tears streaming down her face. She never told me, she whispered. All this time, Eliza continued, her voice growing stronger. I've set everything in motion. By the time you see this, I'll have retrieved the final piece of evidence from the place where it all began. If something happens to me, everything goes public. If I disappear like Rebecca did, everything goes public. This ends now. The video ended with Eliza looking directly into the camera, her expression resolute. Sometimes the only way out is through. By tomorrow, everyone will understand. The place where it all began, Marquez repeated, already heading for the door. She's at the Winters estate. The mayor's mansion sat on 10 acres of manicured grounds overlooking the bay. Built by Richard Winters' grandfather, a logging baron who had clear-cut vast swaths of the surrounding forest before environmental regulations existed, it represented old money and power in a town that had seen better days. The 3-story colonial revival structure gleamed white in the moonlight, its columns and porticos designed to evoke the plantations of the South rather than the modest sea captains' homes that characterized most of Harborview's historic district. By the time Marquez and her team arrived, lights blazed from every window, and the mayor's security detail, 2 retired state troopers who normally maintained a discreet distance, were visibly patrolling the perimeter. Chief Wilson had called ahead, ostensibly to warn the mayor about the Instagram video, giving Marquez no choice but to approach directly. She had no doubt Richard Winters was already destroying evidence, but she had enough probable cause now for a proper search warrant, which Judge Sandoval had approved in record time once shown the video evidence. Richard Winters met them at the door, his politician's smile firmly in place despite the tension evident in his shoulders. He changed into casual clothes, khakis and a Harborview Yacht Club sweater, as if he'd been relaxing at home rather than scrambling to contain a crisis. Detective Marquez, what a surprise. I'm afraid this isn't a good time for a visit. We're not here for a visit, Mr. Mayor, Marquez replied, presenting the warrant she'd obtained based on Eliza's video evidence. We're here to search the property, specifically the area behind the rose garden where your greenhouse stands now. The color drained from the mayor's face. Behind him, Catherine Winters appeared, her expression unreadable as always. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, her silk loungewear suggesting elegant relaxation rather than the panic that must have engulfed the household after the video went public. Richard, what's happening? Nothing, darling. A misunderstanding. He turned back to Marquez. This is absurd. You're acting on the delusions of my mentally unstable daughter. I'll have your badge for this. We have cadaver dogs on the way, Marquez continued, unmoved by his threats. And we have questions about Rebecca Holloway's disappearance, as well as about your grandchild. Catherine's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. Grandchild? What grandchild? The facade was crumbling, and Richard Winters knew it. His eyes darted around, calculating his options. You need to leave. Now. I'm calling the chief. The chief is already aware of the situation. Marquez bluffed. She had, in fact, deliberately kept the police chief out of the loop for this part of the operation, knowing his close ties to the mayor. And we have officers at all exits of the property. Now, where is your daughter? The sound came from somewhere behind the house, a woman's scream, quickly muffled but unmistakable in the night air. Without waiting for permission, Marquez and her team pushed past the Winters and raced toward the back of the property. The expansive garden was dark except for solar-powered path lights that cast eerie shadows across the manicured lawns. Ornamental shrubs had been sculpted into perfect geometric shapes, flower beds arranged with military precision, not a weed in sight. The perfection itself seemed sinister now, as if it were hiding something beneath its orderly surface. At the far end stood the greenhouse, its glass panes gleaming in the moonlight. The structure was larger than Marquez had expected, not a hobbyist's garden shed, but a substantial building with curved Victorian-style glass panels forming a dome in the center. Warm light glowed from within, silhouetting two figures engaged in what appeared to be a struggle. As they approached, they could see two figures inside. Eliza, backing away from her father's personal assistant and head of security, Marcus Reeves. In Eliza's hand was a metal box, clutched tightly to her chest. Reeves was advancing slowly, his hand extended as if attempting to reason with her, but the outline of a weapon visible beneath his jacket told a different story. "Drop the box, Eliza," they could hear him saying through the glass. "This doesn't have to get messy. Your father just wants what belongs to him. Then you can go back to your life, take a nice long vacation somewhere tropical. On the family dime, of course." "You mean like Rebecca did?" Eliza's voice was muffled but audible, her tone bitter. "I know what happens to people who threaten my father's reputation. I've seen the photos of what you did to her." Marquez drew her weapon as they burst through the greenhouse door, the humid, perfumed air hitting her like a wall. Exotic plants and flowers created a jungle-like atmosphere, with narrow paths winding between raised beds and hanging baskets. The central area had been cleared, revealing a stone floor with what appeared to be a large drainage grate, the perfect place to conceal something beneath. "Police! Freeze!" Marquez shouted, her aim steady on Reeves. Reeves turned, his own gun now visible in his hand. He was a large man, ex-military judging by his bearing, with the dead eyes of someone who had long ago learned to follow orders without questioning their morality. "This doesn't concern you, detective. Family business." "Put the weapon down, Mr. Reeves," Marquez commanded, her aim steady. "It's over." "Is it?" he asked, almost conversationally. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a disturbed young woman broke into her parents' property and made wild accusations against a respected public figure. Happens all the time with these artistic types. Too much emotion, not enough grip on reality." For a moment, it seemed like Reeves might comply. His shoulders relaxed slightly, the gun lowering a fraction of an inch. Then his expression hardened, and he swung the gun toward Eliza. "Sorry, kid. Your dad pays my mortgage." The shot came not from Reeves, but from Officer Daniels beside Marquez. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, shattering the peaceful illusion of the greenhouse. Several glass panes cracked from the concussion. Orchid petals drifted down like snow. Reeves crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder, his weapon clattering across the stone floor and landing among the exotic ferns. Eliza stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. The metal box remained clutched to her chest like a shield. Her face was pale, a small cut on her cheek bleeding from what looked like a previous altercation. He was going to kill me," she stammered. "Just like he killed Rebecca. He's the one who did it, on my father's orders." Marquez approached her carefully, holstering her weapon. "You're safe now, Eliza. We're going to get you out of here." She glanced at the metal box. "Is that what you came for?" Eliza nodded, her knuckles white around the tarnished metal container. "The proof. I found it buried under the floorboards in my grandmother's room. She kept it all these years. Rebecca's journal. The letters my father sent her threatening to ruin her career if she went public about the baby. And," her voice broke, "pictures of my baby, my son, the adoption records with his new name." Within minutes, the greenhouse was swarming with police. EMTs attended to Reeves, who maintained sullen silence as they treated his shoulder wound. Mayor Winters and his wife were detained in separate police cars while officers with shovels began examining the area beneath the drainage grate where ground-penetrating radar had detected an anomaly. The metal box Eliza had been protecting was secured as evidence, its contents carefully cataloged by evidence technicians working in the back of a mobile command unit. Inside were documents detailing payments to Rebecca Holloway to keep quiet about her pregnancy, followed by payments to Reeves that coincided with her disappearance. There was also a flash drive containing videos of Mayor Winters discussing how to handle the Rebecca situation with Reeves. Most damning was Rebecca's journal, which detailed not only her relationship with Richard, but also the zoning fraud she had uncovered, a scheme that had made Richard's father-in-law millions when waterfront property was rezoned for commercial development just days after he had purchased it at residential prices. But the most heart-wrenching evidence was a small bundle of photos showing a newborn baby, Eliza's child, along with adoption papers arranging his placement with a family in Seattle under a falsified voluntary surrender. A single photo showed Eliza, clearly sedated and confused, signing papers in what appeared to be a private medical facility. But the most damning evidence came the next morning, when the cadaver dogs located human remains exactly where Eliza had indicated, beneath the greenhouse that had been built 27 years ago, shortly after Rebecca's disappearance. In the aftermath, the truth about the Winters family unraveled like a poorly knitted sweater. Richard Winters was arrested for conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. Catherine Winters, who claimed to have known nothing about Rebecca or Eliza's forced confinement, nonetheless faced charges related to the illegal adoption. Marcus Reeves, facing life in prison, quickly turned on his employer, providing even more details about the night Rebecca died. Eliza's story became national news, her Instagram account gaining millions of followers overnight. The final post from that account, made by Eliza herself after her rescue from the greenhouse, was a photo of sunrise over Harborview, with the caption, "The only way out was through. The truth has finally set me free." For Detective Marquez, the case represented something rare in her career: complete justice. Not only for Eliza, but for Rebecca Holloway and the child Eliza had been forced to give up. With the help of records found in Catherine's personal safe, they were able to locate Eliza's child, a 2-year-old boy named Jamie, living with a family in Seattle who had believed they were completing a legal adoption. The court battle that followed was complicated and painful, but resulted in Eliza being granted visitation rights, with the possibility of shared custody in the future. The adoptive parents, who had been unaware of the circumstances, eventually formed a cautious relationship with Eliza for Jamie's sake. The little boy, with his mother's expressive eyes and artistic temperament, would grow up knowing the truth about his origins, not the sanitized version Richard and Catherine had planned, but the complex, difficult reality that Eliza insisted he deserved. "I was robbed of my choices," Eliza explained in her first and only television interview, a year after the case broke. "My father decided what would happen to my body, to my baby, to my future. I won't do that to Jamie. He deserves to know where he comes from, all of it, the good and the bad. And someday, when he's old enough to understand, I'll tell him about his grandmother Rebecca, who was brave enough to stand up to powerful men, even when it cost her everything." Mia stood by her friend throughout the ordeal, their bond stronger than ever as they began to heal from the secrets that had kept them apart. Jake Dawson, who had built a life in California unaware he had a son, returned to Harborview after learning the truth. His reunion with Eliza was complicated by years of separation and the manipulations that had kept them apart, but they found a way forward as co-parents, if not as a couple. Together, Eliza and Mia converted the old Victorian on Sycamore Street into a center for young women facing crisis pregnancies, ensuring they had the support and resources Eliza had been denied. They named it Rebecca's Place in honor of the woman whose death had set everything in motion, and whose daughter, in a way, Eliza had become, carrying on her fight for truth decades later. As for the Lighthouse Keeper's residence, it became the subject of Eliza's next photography project, Illumination, Finding Light in the Darkest Places. The exhibition opened a year after her father's conviction, with proceeds benefiting organizations supporting victims of domestic abuse and coercive control. In her artist's statement, displayed prominently at the entrance to the gallery, Eliza wrote, "For years, I lived in the shadow of secrets, believing I was alone in my pain. I shared my final message thinking it might be the end, when in reality, it was just the beginning. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is shine a light on the darkness. Sometimes, the only way out is through." Eliza Winters' story reminds us that appearances can be deceiving, especially in the carefully curated world of social media. Behind her perfect Instagram feed lay a young woman fighting for truth and justice, not just for herself, but for those who could no longer speak. Her final message wasn't an ending, but a beginning, the start of healing, of justice, and of a life reclaimed from those who had tried to control it. This has been Raven Reports. Remember, not all monsters wear masks, but all masks eventually slip. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next report. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to make sure you never miss an episode. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories to light. Stay safe out there, and remember, the truth will always find its way into the light.